Congressman from Washington State and ranking member, as I said, from the Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you weren't in the meeting today. First off, why not? And secondly, has your opinion changed?
My opinion has not changed. And why not? I actually had Armed Services Committee business. We were looking at the Nunn-McCurdy breach on the Sentinel program, and I had to be there. Plus, the caucus knows where I stand. And no, my opinion has not changed. And look, I've heard some of the commentary. I think Joe Biden's done an outstanding job as president. The things that his press secretary was talking about on insulin, on the CHIPS Act, on infrastructure, on a whole series of issues. I think he's done a great job. I think we need to deliver that message. It has never been a question in my mind as to whether or not Joe Biden is a good man and a great president. The question is, can he prosecute the case against Donald Trump and for the Democratic message and our policies going forward? And I have not changed my opinion that there are many other prominent Democrats who could prosecute that case better, and the stakes are so high, we just shouldn't take that risk.
Do you think the White House, the campaign, the president himself is being honest with you, the American public, about his abilities?
Look, I can't really comment on that. That gets into inside details about what they've said or done. All I know is what I've personally observed and what people have told me and what people saw in the debate and in other instances as well. So I'm not going to get into that. That's up to them to figure out what they're saying or not. I will say that on the health care issue, I wouldn't go so far as to say honest, but there needs to be greater transparency. Look, his health care is now in question. 2 straight White House press briefings have been focused on his health care. Question is out there, and I know some people are saying, well, Democrats should just basically shut up and fall in line. We're not the ones bringing up this issue. The American people are bringing up this issue, and we have to deal with it. I mean, you just watched, Chuck Schumer, I'm with Joe. Okay, that's great, but the American people, they want answers, okay? They don't want it to look like, can't talk about that. The stakes are so incredibly high here, and again, I just wish that the Biden team, the White House, the campaign, would put the ego aside, put the, what Joe Biden necessarily wants aside, and take an honest look at the stakes in this election and whether or not they can honestly say that at this moment, Joe Biden is going to be able to prosecute that case between now and November.
Well, respectfully, it does sound like you're saying that no, they're not being honest. I'm not asking you about conversations you've had with them, but are they being honest to the American public?
It's a difference of opinion, but I would say, I think that's a fair point. Look, I think honest is a strong statement. I think they're dodging, okay, in a way that doesn't look good. They're not being as honest and authentic with the American people as they can be. And look, the president has had some struggles before that debate, and I was with him 100%. And I've been on shows like this before, and people have asked me, and what I said was, look, he's not the best communicator, okay? He's not the best campaigner, but he's a really good president. And I could honestly say several months ago on CNN, that, look, I would rather have someone who's good at the job than someone who's good at campaigning for the job. And I was enthusiastic about that. But after that debate performance and what followed, the inability to deliver that message has risen to the point where I think more Democrats should be concerned about it.
Do you think there should be an open convention, or do you think there should be a nomination of Kamala Harris, who's been on the ticket with him?
Yeah, I leave that up to the DNC and to the delegates. Personally, I would support Kamala Harris. I think she's done a great job as vice president, particularly in the last couple of years. She's been a very strong voice on a number of important issues. I attend the Munich Security Conference every year. She's been taking the lead for the administration at the Munich Security Conference, talking about Ukraine, talking about NATO in a very strong and compelling way. Certainly on choice, she has also been strong and compelling. But that would be up to the delegates. And I know everyone says, well, they had an election and everybody voted for Joe. Well, 2 things about that. 1, there was no meaningful opposition. And second, if that debate had happened in November of last year, before any of those people voted, do you think that would have changed the way Democrats would have viewed their choices?
Democrats haven't viewed their choices as good for a long time now. I mean, I don't think they needed the debate to say, hey, I want somebody else. They've been saying they want somebody else for more than a year now. The polling has shown that. So why has the party not come around to it? Why is the party... Why are you only saying this now when voters have been out there saying for a long time that they don't want him to run again?
Two separate questions. First of all, on me, two things crystallized after the debate. One, I thought there was a chance that Biden wouldn't run at that point. Prior to that, I didn't think there was a chance. And I'm not into suicide missions, okay? And plus, the second thing, that debate made it a lot worse. As anyone watching that debate could say, it was a tipping point for me. Prior to that, it's like, look, you know, nobody's perfectly articulate, and I could justify and say, yes, I think he's the right candidate. After that debate, I couldn't. As far as the rest of the party is concerned, I hesitate to speak for people, but I'll come back to two things. One, the enormous amount of respect and, frankly, love that we have for Joe Biden and the service that he has done to this country, and the desire to defend him, by the way, from a lot of the garbage attacks that have come from Republicans and others. So that passion is there for him. And second, and this is a legitimate question, which I'm getting a lot of now, if he's going to be your nominee, you can't ever criticize him. All right? I hear that. My opinion is, A, stakes are too high. We need a different candidate. B, I will point out that it was only since we started criticizing a few days ago that the Biden campaign ramped up their efforts. You know, 7, 8 days passed after the debate without much. We started criticizing. They woke up. So I don't think criticism is necessarily a bad thing.
Do you think Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump?
Well, he can, sure. I don't think it's likely, you know, and if he turns out to be the nominee, I'm all in. Let's go, because he's certainly better than any of the other choices that are out there, but it is an enormous risk to take, and I think he would have a hard time making the best case for the Democratic Party.
Well, let me ask it this way. Do you think if he is reelected that he's capable of making game-time decisions at a moment's notice all 24 hours of the day?
I don't know. And that's why I think we should have, you know, a more transparent thing. I tend to think, yes, he has to date, you know, despite having some of the struggles we saw. I mean, I forget who it was. Well, it was Russ Moore, who was making a very compelling case that when that ship hit the bridge in Maryland, 3:40 in the morning, Joe Biden was on the phone saying, what can we do? I've certainly seen him fly back and forth in other ways. So right now, let me just say, I don't have doubts about his ability to do the job as president. What I have doubts about is his ability to successfully and effectively prosecute the case, as I keep saying, against Donald Trump and for the Democratic Party. And I think we saw that.
Well, can I ask you that again? Because we've seen visually a decline in Joe Biden over the past few years. I mean, I watch him all the time. I probably watch him more than you do. I sit in this chair and I go to press conferences that he holds or events that he holds, and there has been a decline. Do you think that decline is going to stop now? Are you confident that in 2-3 years that he's still going to be able to make the game time decisions as he made, for instance, as you mentioned, about the bridge?
Well, again, not to keep saying two things about that, but two things about that. Number one, right now, today, I am, okay? Two, I'm not a doctor, okay? Look, I think we all know that, you know, aging is aging, and the clock only ticks in one direction.
Yep.
But right now, in this moment, I can say that, yes, I'm confident. And I'm not going to get into predicting the future. If at some point in the future it gets to the point where I look at that and I can't confidently say that, well, that's a different conversation.
Do you think that the Democratic Party would have a better chance of beating Donald Trump with somebody else? Is there
1,000%.
Okay.
1,000%.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing this. And look, you know, I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, it'll be a contested convention. If there's one thing the American people like, they like something new. They always have, all right? In fact, they've been fairly well begging for the last 2 years to give some other candidate. If we as a Democratic Party gave them something new, I think the boost we would get out of that would far outweigh any concerns about how we got that nominee there in the first place.
How does the saying go? Never let a good crisis go to waste.
I never liked that saying, particularly for a variety of different reasons, but I'm not saying it now. I'm just saying, look, we got to pick the best candidate.
It's a Rahm Emanuelism, but as I think originally said by Saul Alinsky.
Yes, yeah, understood.
All right. Adam Smith, ranking member of the Armed Services Committee in the House, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for being so honest with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And joining us now.